and then he works back to the beginning. We don't. We start at the beginning and hope we're going to end up the right way. We don't. So if you're divorced, listen, I'm not putting you down tonight, and this is not judgment on you. This is just an illustration of this life that I'm trying to share with you tonight. And that is that if we have come to the understanding of who we are, that is that you are spirit. You're not a mortal human being. You are spirit living in a body, and that spirit is Christ, and Christ is God. Then that's a different story. When you start from that point, then of course you never do anything until you know this is the will of God for my life. And especially in marriage, because it's so important. Because I just don't think of couples getting divorced. I'm thinking of the children. I have seen children totally devastated because parents were divorced. And I don't mean that every divorce, doesn't have a reason behind it. Sure, there'll be enough reasons behind it. But I'm just saying for us, it's like we made a mistake. We shouldn't have married this one. Maybe we should have married somebody else. Well, then in the beginning, if we had have asked the Lord, Father, should I marry this person? It's got nothing to do with what I see, whether he's tall, dark, and handsome, whether he's got $1 million in the bank, or it's got nothing to do with anything at all, except Father says, that's your partner. And I believe that's what God did for me. Because she wasn't the one that I'd picked myself, but I knew it was God. And she was the quietest person. I took my girlfriend home to show my mum and dad, and I was 22 years of age at that time. I took her there, and after, when I talked to Mum, I said, what do you think, Mum? And she said, she's like a little sparrow. She hardly said boo. I said, yeah. She was scared, wondering what you were going to think about her and so on. I said, well, I'm going to tell you, she thought you were wonderful. And she had forever, right through her life. And she was a great blessing to my wife, because my wife's mother died 3 weeks before we were married. So she never had a mother to even witness her wedding. But my mother replaced her mother. She loved her just like her own daughter. Wonderful. So, okay, let's go on. Let's go on. This is Genesis chapter 3 now. And the woman starts to talk to the serpent, which is the carnal mind. The carnal mind is the serpent. And the serpent is more subtle than all the beasts of the field. Now, when you relate that to your carnal mind, now you better be afraid of it, because that thing's going to mess you up. The carnal mind is the mind that is presently controlling your body. The carnal mind is the reason why you get sick. The carnal mind is actually why you die. Because the carnal mind is death. Romans chapter 8, Paul tells you straight out. The carnal mind is death. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 14, the Apostle Paul says, the natural man with this natural mind cannot understand the things of the Spirit of God. It is foolishness to him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. That's what Paul says about this carnal mind. He cannot know them. It's impossible for this mind to know God. Impossible. Because it has no input into the Spirit. This is the mind of the living soul. It's the mind that is connected directly to the soul. This mind has 5 senses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. Those are the 5 senses of your soulish life. And with those 5 senses, you create your world. You create your reality. That's your reality. It means what you see, what you can touch, what you can taste, smell, and hear. That becomes your reality. Now, connected with that is verse 18 in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, where the Apostle Paul says, everything you can see with your eyes is passing away. In other words, it's got no reality. And yet that's one of your faculties that you use to create your reality, or the reality of your life. So you go to a doctor, he said, I'm sorry, but you've got cancer. You see, here's your x-ray. See that little shadow there in the x-ray? There's your cancer. And you look at that and say, I've got cancer. You see? And then cancer's got you. But if you're living out of the Spirit doesn't have two eyes, it only has one. So in Matthew chapter 6, Matthew chapter 6, and verse 22. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye be single, which means that you're not using these two eyes, which is dual. If your eye be single, what happens? Your whole body will be filled with light. Therefore it cannot have sickness, cancer cannot touch it, etc., etc. Because light is what God is. So the Christ in you, the God that dwells in you, is filling your whole body with light. Therefore nothing can touch it. So he says, but if your eye be evil, or dual if you like, that is, if you're looking with your natural eyes, what happens? It says your whole body will be filled with darkness. Oh Lord, help us tonight. You see, God has gone to such trouble to show us all these things. They're all in the book. But you know, Matthew 4 and verse 4, you know what Jesus said? Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that is proceeding out of the mouth of God. You see, the Greek have a tense called the present continuous tense. Man shall live by every word that is proceeding out of the mouth of God. This is where you hear this is where you hear the voice of God. And if you don't hear the voice of God, then you don't know God, and then you will never know what he's talking about. Because you see, this is bread alone. This is what the verse says. Man shall not live by bread alone. The word alone in the Greek language means static. It means it doesn't change. So, you know, these two verses, just take these two verses now. You've probably read them many times. Many times. You knew that was there. You may have even been able to quote the verse. But you see, you didn't know what God was saying to you, because it was the ink on the paper. You understand? And this is what we've done. We know so many things out of the Bible, and people are trying to live by verses in the Bible. God never meant you to live by a verse in the Bible.